So I have been sick for about the past week. Don't know what I had, but it really knocked me out. So we're going to do a small project today, get back in the swing of things. And we want to start off, give a big shout out to Mike Giberson. He's been sending me all sorts of great additions to the boat. And what I've got here from him is a little anchor, and a mantis anchor for the dinghy. And I have a little claw anchor. So this was a surprise. This was just something he had seen online and thought would be nice to have. And so it's a great anchor, but I think it's awesome. It's going to look great on the dinghy. And so what I'm thinking project-wise is I've got to find a way to mount this on the dinghy because it has quite the sharp point to it. And obviously with an inflatable, we don't just want this flopping around like I have. My other anchor folds up that I've got in there now. It's small and it's drugged before. But what I'm thinking is, after all my rambling there, I ordered a small 3D printer recently. And I've got a history with 3D printing. That's kind of how I saved up my money for this sailboat. You'll see the picture on screen, but I had a 3D print farm, about 50 machines back in Missouri, sold some parts and things online. And so I wanted to get a small one to have here on the boat because I think they're pretty handy for making parts. And so that'll be coming soon. But what we're going to try to do is we'll go ahead and assemble this anchor and then get some dimensions of the anchor and the transom. And I'm thinking I can 3D print sort of kind of like a bow roller, but it would be vertical and fit on the back of the transom, and that anchor can be secured back there far away from the inflatable. You'll see as things go on, but what we're just gonna do tonight, this is gonna be a slow video, nothing too exciting. We'll get this anchor assembled and then get some measurements of the dinghy, and I'll show you how I draw it up on the computer. There of my transom, and ideally where I wanted to mount the anchor, original thought, realized it's not quite going to work out, but move the anchor around, and I think I found a new potential option. When we're engineering something new though, never know if it's going to work 100%, at least on this, at least my scale of what I'm doing. But I think I've got another idea. So what I'm going to do first is sketch it up on paper using my dimensions I took down, try to kind of work out any of the problems I can on paper, and then once I have a solid idea of the model I want to do, that's when we'll try to extrude it here on the computer. So I've kind of sketched a few different angles to try to, like I said, work out the 3D model in my head. On paper it's a lot easier to scratch, and what I'm leaning towards, we'll see if it portrays on the computer, is something sort of like this. And it's kind of hard to tell, but this would be the slot where the transom fits in, and then where it is dotted would be the channel that this anchor, I think you call it the shank or the shaft of the anchor, would sit in that channel. And you can kind of see how that would slide in from the top. And then I've got a hole there that would go through the hole on the anchor, and I can maybe put a bolt or something like that to help lock this anchor in place while we're dinghying around. So that's kind of the rough idea from this angle. I think I've got it worked out enough to start trying to portray it on the computer. And so I will bring you over there and show you as I get any progress. I'm going to throw you over to the computer screen. You'll still be able to hear me. But this is what I've got modeled up. I use Autodesk Fusion 360, and it's free to use for hobby versions. And so what I have done, this is the right side view. This slot here is going to be where the transom would be. And then I will show you. She's a little glitchy here. Let's see here. Let me get this. Okay. So this side over here would be where I'm sitting, and this would be the aft of the transom. And the anchor has that little hole on the top. This should line right up with it, give us a little wiggle room, and I think we could put some sort of a bolt. I don't know exactly what's going to work the easiest, but something to slide in there to hold that anchor in nice and tight while we're dinghying around. And then you can see I've got a slot here that she'll fit down. That shaft is going to fit right in there. It's got an extra millimeter about on both sides. That should give it plenty of wiggle room, but still keep her nice and tight while we're bouncing around on the dinghy. And I've got it to where this face here will be touching pretty close to the into that shaft there. Like I said, lots of big words. It'll be easier to see once it's printed. And not the easiest to rotate here. Let's change over to this side, and this will be the side that's facing me sitting in the dinghy. You can see what I've done to mount it. I've got two mounting holes here, and this is just a little larger than the diameter of the head of the bolt I'm going to be using, and then that'll be where the shaft sticks through. And I had to cut a little bit into my wall here just so it could fit in when installing. You can see it there. And so those will be the heads of the bolts, and that cuts all the way through, and that'll drill through the transom. And then on the other side I put a nice hole here so I can fit my socket, and then I'll have my washer and lock nut on the outside. So I think it's a nice design. I tried to make it real thin. I don't have a ton of room where it's going to be in the dinghy, but I think this will lock our anchor on nice and tight there on the transom, and it'll keep that sharp point away from. I could have mounted it on the bow. I looked at some options to do that, but I just really don't want it up front there, especially if I'm climbing over and getting in the boat, and I just don't want that point to hit anything. And it's kind of a big anchor for a dinghy, so like I said, we'll have to wait and see. But anyways, I brought you back to the real world here. That's the plan. It's a lot of fun. It's a good skill to learn. When I was in Pensacola, just had bought the boat. I bought it from a gentleman named Scott, and he was an engineer there in town and gave me a job for a couple months. And I worked on, I think SolidWorks is what we use there at his company, but I was in the drafting department, and we would design lots of parts. And so this is a fairly simple part, and it's a good skill to have though, especially making parts for your own boat. My boat's about 40 years old, so you start to find parts that aren't quite as easily available anymore. And I think having this 3D printer will be a good tool to have. It's also a lot of fun because this is a skill. This was my hobby before I got into sailing, and so to be able to do this again, it'll be fun, and I think we can make some pretty good parts like this one. And so that printer should be getting here in a couple days, and I've already got I've got a whole list of parts I've been making while I've been sick, because this is a fun activity to work on the computer here. But I'm excited to get those made up. And thanks again to Mike for sending over this Mantis anchor for the dinghy, and said he wanted to send it over, and so I really appreciate it, and I think it'll be nice to have on the dinghy, especially once we get her all mounted up. Anyways, lots of yapping for me. This is a shorter video, and like I said, not been feeling too good, so I wanted just to work on something nice and easy. But I appreciate you all for watching. Hopefully next week we'll be back in the swing of things and have some more videos. And as always, give a big shout out to all my Patreon subscribers, everyone who's been, I've got a lot of PayPal donations, lots of great comments and good advice from people, so I really appreciate each and every one of you. I've been going through and finding everyone who's donated other means as well and sent items, and I've added all of your names onto the back of my boat there. And I'm doing that because I want to thank you all for helping support my adventure, kind of bring you along for the adventure in a way. So if you would like to help support the adventure, I've got a couple links in the description below. You can take a look at those. And if not, I appreciate you watching and hanging out with me for the week. And I look forward to seeing you in next week's video.